In this video of family member topics, we're going to be taking a look at enabling behaviors and healthy behaviors. Often the term enabling behaviors can be a bit triggering for family members, as people have used this term as a way to add more judgment and stigma to their lives. So one alternative is to just use more friendly terms such as things that I do that are helpful and things that I do that might not be so helpful. So enabling behavior is maybe when I take on feeling responsible for the actions or take on the feelings of my loved one. In this exercise, using the coping dam, we're going to invite the family member to explore what's happening when their loved one is using substances, and then maybe what's happening when we start engaging in activities that might not be so helpful. I invite the family member to first explore their loved one's substance use. And I do this by using the coping dam. So as we look at the coping dam, I'll invite family members to brainstorm what emotions are ebbing and flowing in their loved ones' lives that may be contributing to substance use. So for example, if they're allowing their stress to hit 10 out of 10 and that's when they use, what are some other examples? Some common things that family members will tell us is that their loved one might struggle with stress and anger, sometimes disappointment, maybe feeling overwhelmed, sadness, and allowing the family member to just explore some of those emotions that their loved one might be facing. And so then I invite them to explore what are some things when their loved one is not managing some of these emotions and maybe finding another different coping strategy to use. They hit 10 out of 10, like 10 out of 10 stressed or 10 out of 10 angry, and they do things that maybe aren't so helpful. And I invite the family member to let me know, what have they seen their loved one do that might not be so helpful? Some of the common ideas is that maybe their loved one becomes aggressive, or they substance use, maybe gamble. And just allowing the family member to explore lots of different things that they've seen their loved one do over the years that may not be so helpful. And then I invite them to explore what are some things our loved ones could have done maybe in order to avoid being aggressive or substance using or gambling or whatever kind of behavior their loved one is experiencing. I talk about 8, 9, and 10 being this danger zone, and that we always want to make sure that we're kind of managing our emotions below this, because once we get into 8, 9, and 10, we tend to do some more of those impulsive or reckless behaviors that may be more harmful than helpful. And so usually family members can come up with lots of ideas that their loved one maybe should be doing. They'll say things like, well, they need to be exercising more. They need to be coming to forecasts and getting some counseling. They should maybe be going to AA or NA. They should be eating healthy, finding new friends. And it usually comes up with a long list of what family members can identify that their loved one needs. So after we've explored this for quite a while, I'll then come over to the other side of the board and invite family members to explore what's happening in their own life. So I'll ask them, what emotions do you struggle with or find hard to manage being a family member of a loved one who substance uses or gambles? They'll often say, I feel stressed. Sometimes I feel angry. I feel disappointed, overwhelmed, sad. Often it mirrors some of the very emotions they were discussing around their loved one. Often we know that guilt comes in with family members as well. And I'll ask the family member, what are some things that happen when family members are not managing their emotions and they hit 10 out of 10? What are some things that they might do? And so some common responses that family members have given over the years are things like, I might isolate, Or I might end up drinking because it's like, if you can't beat him, join him. Or I end up over helping. Or maybe I start yelling at 10 out of 10, telling my loved one they can't go out that night or they have to quit, maybe making some threats. And then often people will be able to identify that they overgive a 10 out of 10. So I invite people to explore if these are things that are maybe not so helpful things that we do, what would be more helpful things that they could do to try to manage their emotions and bring themselves down? And family members begin to make the connection that the coping strategies that are needed when people are in recovery for their addictions are the same coping strategies needed as we attempt to support our loved ones with substance use and gambling concerns. So they begin to make those connections that maybe they need to be exercising, maybe they need counseling, maybe they need to be going to Al-Anon, eating healthy, finding those social supports, and allowing them to come up with as many things as they can to add to their coping strategies. I like to explore with family members how sometimes their behaviors that they would consider not helpful, how in the moment it feels really helpful, just in the same way the substance user probably knows in the long run their substance use isn't going to be overly helpful, but in the moment. So I just highlight if their loved one has a beer when they come home from work and they go from a 10 out of 10 stress to 9 out of 10 stress, and then they have another beer and they're at an 8, and another beer and they're at a 7, another 6, another 5. By the end of the night, their stress seems to be relieved and they can go to sleep. It seems very adaptive in that moment. The next morning when they wake up with a hangover, or their family's mad at them, or they're late for work and they get in trouble, perhaps then they feel the consequences, but usually at the moment, it can feel very adaptive or very helpful. In the same way, family members, sometimes when we engage in enabling behaviors or behaviors that aren't so helpful, we get some relief. So for example, our loved one comes in and we're maybe 6 out of 10 stressed, and we're hurriedly, trying to get dinner made, and the dog's barking, and there were some bills that we weren't expecting at home when we got home, and our loved one is saying, "Give me $50, I want $50. And we're like, "No, you can't have $50. And the stress starts to climb, and they keep badgering and demanding the $50. And we may try again and say, no $50. And they keep going and going and going. And at 10 out of 10, we then might respond by handing the person $50. Now, that might be very regretful a few hours down the road, or the next day, or the next day time we need $50. But at that moment, as we hand over that $50 and our loved one storms out, there might be some relief, some emotional release that they're now gone and I can focus on what I need to get focused on. In the same way that substances can sometimes bring relief in a very quick, easy way, sometimes some of the things we do that aren't so helpful follows that same pattern where we get a little bit of a relief, but then we start to regret it because we begin to realize that we've just taught them, if they keep badgering, if they keep bullying, if they keep insisting, then I'll finally give in. So inviting clients to find a different way to self-soothe and to bring down these emotions, manage these emotions in a different way, so they don't feel like they have to hit 10 out of 10 and maybe turn to some of those old strategies that maybe aren't so helpful. One of the handouts that might be helpful when exploring the coping dam is determining enabling behaviors versus healthy behaviors. It provides 2 parts of a chart so that family members can identify those things that they may be doing that are really helpful and they're really getting some mastery on. And there might be other ones that they realize, this is something I could work on for homework and then be accountable for that and bring it back to you next session.